Hey folks, welcome back to Chasing the Chariots of the Gods, where I take a look at deconstructing Erick von Danekin's book Chariots of the Gods. Welcome to chapter 2.
It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. I'm doing this temporarily until I press a new intro scene. It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. Now on with the main show.
Chapter 2. When our spaceship landed on Earth. Well, before I get started, I do have some updates for you. There's a couple of statements I made wrong in the last video, which thankfully have been corrected in the comments section. So if you want to check them out, go ahead. I have no problem admitting I was wrong in some places. You see the rucksack behind me. This here means I'm going to a music festival, download festival in case you're interested. It's an alternative music, like rock and metal mostly, festival. I'll be going for 5 days. Then 2 days later I'll be in hospital for surgery, and about 4 days after that I'll eventually leave the hospital and get back home somehow. And I'll be laid up, so I don't know when the next video is going to be after this. But it will eventually come, probably when I get very bored of just lying on my arse all day. Right, anyway, chapter 2. Now how I'm going to do this is, because this chapter is one big hypothesis, it's not any claims in there, it's just one big hypothesis. I'm probably going to skip over most of it. I'll just give you a brief description of what's going on, and get to the good parts. So it starts off talking about Jules Verne, saying how his works are no longer science fiction. Well, the last time I travelled to the centre of the earth, I kind of mind. About how the world, we travel around, astronauts in his day, back in 1968, travelled the world in 86 days, not 80 days like his novel, despite the fact it's very different means. And so his description is that a spaceship is going to leave the Earth for a distant sun and 150 light years away. The spaceship will be as big as a Now, this is a bit I'm going to have to give details for, because I've got a cameo coming up that explains why this bit's hilariously bad, or at least why it can't work. It's the physics, you see? Physics, which I don't deal with that much. So I'm going to hand it over to another person to do that with. I'm going to describe it first. So, this spaceship, which will be as big as a present day ocean liner, and would therefore have a launching weight of about 100,000 tonnes, and a fuel load of about 99,800 tonnes. Or, for example, an effective payload of less than 200 tonnes. Impossible? No. Already we could assemble a spaceship piece by piece while in orbit around the planet. We've done it for the International Space Station, but we have to excuse the cold. That took a wee while. We haven't built any spacecraft for travel in space. It's all built on the ground. Even the parts for the International Space Station are built on the ground and taken up by shuttle. So we can already assemble a spaceship piece by piece while in orbit around the planet. Even the assembly work will become unnecessary in less than 2 decades, because it will be possible to prepare the giant spaceship for launching on the moon. Although why you'd want to do that, I don't know. Why that would be more preferable to an orbital station, I don't know. Besides, the basic research for rocket propulsion of tomorrow is in full swing. Future rocket motors will mainly be powered by nuclear fusion and travel at nearly the speed of light. A bold new method, the feasibility of which has already been shown by physical experiments on individual elementary particles, will be the photon rocket. The fuel carried on board the photon rocket enables the rocket's velocity to approach so close to the speed of light that the effects of relativity, especially in time dilation between launching site and spaceship, can operate to the full. The fuel supplies will be transformed into electromagnetic radiation and injected as a clustered propulsive jet with a speed of light. Theoretically, a spaceship equipped with photon propulsion can reach 99% of the speed of light. At this speed, the boundaries of our solar system would be blasted open. This is just the start to the physics problems for folks. An idea that really makes the mind real, but we who are on the threshold of a new age should remember that the great giant strides made in technology which our grandfathers experienced were just as staggering in the day. And he goes on to list technological achievements like the television, satellites, that sort of thing. And he goes on to say that our children's children will go on to enjoy interstellar journeys and carry out cosmic research at technical faculties in the universities. Very possible. Let us follow the journey of our imaginary spaceship, whose goal is a distant fixed star, 150 light years away. It would certainly be amusing to try to imagine what the crew of the spaceship did to kill time on their journey, because however vast distances they covered, and however slowly time might crawl along for those left behind on Earth, Einstein's theory of relativity still holds good. It may sound incredible, but time on board the spaceship, travelling barely below the speed of light, actually passes more slowly than on the Earth. Now the thing is, the man does not understand the theory of relativity well. However, as I don't do physics, I'm not going to waste my time trying to tell you how it works, because I don't have a grasp of how exactly it works either. But I do know it doesn't mean that you can make a journey 150 light years away in a short time. Like that. However, if the spaceship travels at 99% of the speed of light, only 14 to 1 years, that could be a spelling, that could be an error in the book. It could be 14 years pass for our crew on their flight in the universe, whereas 100 pass years go by for those who stay at home. The differences in time between space travellers and people on Earth can be calculated by the following formula given by Lorentz transformation. It gives a few equations to work out the speed of the spaceship's flight, etc, etc. Worked out by Basque rocket equation by Professor Accurate. Anyway, let's carry on. At the moment when our spaceship is approaching the star, which is its target, crew will undoubtedly examine the planets, fix their position, undertake spectral analysis, measure forces of gravity and calculate orbits, etc. Lastly, they will choose the landing place, the planet whose conditions come closest to those of our Earth. If our spaceship consists solely of this payload, if our spaceship consists solely of its payload, after a journey of, shall we say, 80 light years because all the energy supplies have been used up, the crew will have to replenish the tanks of their spacecraft with fissionable materials at their goal. So he's changing the distance to 80 light years, but we'll stick with 150 light years. Or maybe he's just saying that it runs out after 80 light years and the spaceship just carries on. And he actually understands that part of physics, that the spaceship would carry on until enough things cause it to slow down. Getting in its way would cause it to slow down. So the astronauts would travel, would look for fissionable material to refuel fuel. And let us assume then that the planet chosen to land on is similar to Earth, and he's already made the assumption that by no means that this is I've already said that this assumption is by no means impossible. Let us also venture the supposition that this civilization of the planet is visited in about the same state of development as the Earth was 8,000 years ago. So, in this hypothesis which has bad physics, the spaceship is launched from orbit. So it doesn't have to escape Earth's gravity. It's launched from orbit. It's got to travel 150 light years away. According to him, it's going to run out of fuel at 80 light years. Although I think he's just taken another equation, a number out of his arse, in this one. The spaceship, the space crew will not be in stasis of any kind, and nor will it be multi-generational or anything like that. And he thinks that it'll take, that only 14 years will pass for the people in the ship compared to, say, 100 years on Earth. Well, to counteract this, I'm going to pass this along to someone else. And for my cameo for this episode, I give you along to The Way of the Pasta. If you would please.
I've been asked to just say a few words about some claims that were made by Erick von Danekin in his book Chariots of the Gods. He's stating that we could build a ship that would travel to a nearby planet, well, nearby being 150 light years away, with the thrust provided by photon rockets and the power provided by nuclear fission. The ship would weigh 100,000 tonnes, of which 98,000 tonnes of that would be fuel, and we would be travelling at 99% of the speed of light. Now, the inference in his book is that the same crew that leaves Earth will arrive there. Now, if we're travelling close to the speed of light and the planet is 150 light years away, how long do you think it's going to take us to get there? Here's a clue: 150 light years and a bit. There will be some time dilation effects between the ship and Earth at that sort of a relativistic speed, but it won't be affecting the actual travel time to get to where we're going. And after 150 years, who wouldn't want to shag? I've heard about people travelling a long way for sex, but that's just a little bit ridiculous. The other thing in regards to this, there are some issues I have with the claim that after 80 years apparently the fuel would be used up on this particular ship, even though it's 98,000 tonnes of it. That may indeed happen. I haven't crunched all the numbers on that, but it just seems a bit strange, and you would not probably be able to maintain the speed of 99% light speed if that was the case, because at that speed there will be some resistance. I haven't calculated the numbers, from just the small amount of molecules in space, which brings up another interesting issue. At that speed, if you collide with even small objects at that sort of 99% relative to the speed of light, you're going to generate a considerable amount of friction, particularly on a ship that is 100,000 tonnes in size. And you'd have two options, I would imagine, in order to try to avoid the friction. One would be to put extra shielding at the front of the ship, which of course then would increase the weight and lower your efficiency. The second, of course, is that you could use some new fantastic invention that we haven't invented yet, just to push all the atoms and particles out of the way at near light speed, which would, I would imagine, take quite a bit of energy that would again come from the nuclear fission, which would then have more of a drain on your actual fuel sources. So that wouldn't work. Now, 150 light years, you've got to have a crew that is going to live at least that long. Longer, in fact. Assuming you could train somebody up at 16 to actually fly the damn thing, they would arrive at the sprightly age of about 166 at the destination, and I'm sure after that amount of time they would be just dying for a shag. Well, dying anyway. So barring some major breakthrough in genetic engineering that increases our longevity to something like 200 years, and even at that I would imagine you'd be pretty hard pressed to procreate at those sorts of ages that you'd arrive at anyway, it seems a little bit difficult, and you probably wouldn't be very sexually attractive at that age either. So I would say there would be some problems here. The other quick problem is that he's talking about running out of fuel, and yet the whole concept of photon rockets, nobody seems to know the efficiency of what a photon rocket would be. So how he's come to an actual figure of 80 years into the trip that the fuel would run out, I simply don't know, because if we don't know the efficiency of photon rockets, how the heck can we calculate when the fuel's going to run out? We simply can't do it. It just seems to be another figure that he's probably plucked out. I hope it's some sort of guesstimate. I don't know. This whole trip is highly unfeasible.
So there you go. Thank you very much for the pasta. Link down below to go sub to him. Do so. Right, so now that we're on the planet, he goes on to presume that they're Stone Age. The people there are Stone Age. They'd view the astronauts as gods who landed in the big huge ship. That the people trapped, the astronauts would be, you know, rocket belts all over the place. For some reason, all-purpose vehicles and helicopters. You know, and for some reason they'd be exploding things in the mountains. I presume mining is what he means. And that they would appear as gods to these primitive people. And he goes on to say that these space travellers would do this work day by day, until eventually a delegation of priests and medicine men approached the astronauts, who they considered the chief in their primitive mind, they say. He says, they bring gifts to pay homage to their guests, and he says the spacemen are more than likely learn a language from computers, of natives from computers. And then they can thank him for his courtesy shown. And they can try to explain themselves away as not being gods, you know, not being worthy of veneration. The people, being dumb as far as he's concerned, petty savages, will not accept this and still view them as gods. So apparently then the astronauts will have a preconceived idea, a preconceived plan of taking part of the population and training them to help search the crater formed by an explosion for fissionable matter needed for a return to Earth. So they're going to blow up a part of the planet and create a crater to look for fissionable materials instead of, say, mining it and using, I don't know, equipment to look for fissionable materials. Okay. And not only that, they're going to train the Stone Age primitive population to look for these materials. Not the daft part yet. And then they'll, the most intelligent of the inhabitants, the natives, the astronauts will elect as king. And as a sign of his power, he'll be given a radio set to contact and address the gods any time. Though what purpose this would serve, I have no idea. Apparently the astronauts would try to teach natives the simplest forms of civilization and moral concepts, because, you know, Stone Age people didn't have civilization at all. No. Nor did they have moral concepts. Not at all. That Stonehenge, by the way, that's never came from a civilization. Neither did all the brochs in Scotland, which are Neolithic houses found throughout the Highlands of Scotland. You know, all these things happening some 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, all the material that we find, never had any civilization. So anyway, where was I? So the natives are getting taught the civilization, moral concepts to make a development, and then we get to the fun bit, the bit that really makes me laugh at how unscientific this book really is, at how ridiculous it fucking can be. A few specially selected women would be fertilized by the astronauts. Thus a new race would arise that skipped a stage in natural evolution. That's right, you heard it here first, folks. A few specially selected women would be fertilized by the astronauts. Thus a new race would arise that skipped a stage in natural evolution. Which just goes to show that he has no understanding whatsoever of the theory of biological evolution, as well as not understanding physics. For starters, how do two species produce viable offspring if they are able to reproduce? Because they don't. Any offspring produced by two different species who are actually managed to create a an offspring, the offspring would be sterile, and that's how it works. One of the definitions of species is being able to breed and produce viable offspring. Secondly, why would the native peoples that are apparently intelligent enough to have Stone Age, why would they have similar physiology as humans? Why would they be morphologically enough the same that they have the same sexual organs, that we can fertilise them and actually have sex with them? It's not how evolution works. Biological evolution is small changes over a long period of time that comes from adaptation, i.e. adapting to your environment, and those that adapt best and produce positive genes that help them survive better will go on to breed will be more likely to breed and thus pass on the good genes that help them survive. Even if the planet is practically Earth-like, the situations will be different and they'll have adapted differently. So like I say, why would we be shagging them? It's not Star Trek. This is not how evolution works. You can't go around shagging alien species and producing offspring. Spock is not real. Spock cannot happen. So apparently we also know from our own development how long it would take before this new race became space experts. Because, you know, the human development is obviously a fucking good sign. You know, like the Dark Ages, when all throughout Western Europe, learning was pretty much frowned upon. And no real developments happened as such. Whereas in, say, the Islamic countries, they had a golden age of science. Development differs depending on the social the social consensus as well. So, and then consequently, after all this has happened, before the astronauts leave, they'd leave behind clear and visible signs which only a highly technical, mathematically based society would be able to understand much, much later. And then apparently he states that if we try to warn our protégés of any dangers in store, they'd have little chance of success because they'd go on to make the same mistakes that humanity made, because they're thick as shit as humanity is, I guess. And then when he says, well, our spaceship disappears again into the mist of the universe, our friends will talk about the miracle. The gods were here. They will translate it into their own language, turn it into a saga, or if they have writing, you know, they'll write it down. The text will relate and show that the gods arrived in chariots and flying boats and stuff, and terrifying weapons that were like lightning. And they'll make like rock pictures of what they've seen apparently, though if they've got writing, why would you use rock pictures? Shapeless giants with helmets and rods on their heads carry boxes in front of their chest, and all these other things are supposed to resemble gods. And it goes on to say there are no limits to the fantasy of illustrations that result from the visit of our spaceship. We shall see later what traces of gods who visited the earth in our remote antiquity engraved on the tablets of the past. It's quite easy to sketch the subsequent development of the planet that our spaceship visited. The inhabitants have learnt a lot by watching the gods surreptitiously. The place on which the spaceship stood shall be declared holy ground, a place of pilgrimage where heroic deeds of the gods will be praised in song. Pyramids and temples will be built on it. Why would they build pyramids unless we built them to show them how? Why would they think that pyramids are best? Why would they do that at all? Why would they build temples? And this is a fun part. In accordance with the astronomical laws, of course. So the pyramids and the temples are getting built in accordance to these astronomical laws. What astronomical laws? Gravity, perhaps? Thermodynamics? What astronomical laws is he talking about? I don't know, maybe the law of acceleration. And then he says, in terrible grammar, the people grows, there are wars that devastate the place of the gods. And then come generations who rediscover and excavate the holy places and try to interpret the signs. This is the stage we have reached. Now that we can land men on the moon, we can open our minds to space travel. We know the effect of sudden arrival of a large ocean-going sailing vessel had on primitive peoples, in, for example, the South Sea Islands. And we know the devastating effects that of a man like Cortez from another civilization had on South America. So we can appreciate it only dimly the fantastic impact the arrival of spacecraft would have in prehistoric times. Except a couple of things. The South Sea Islanders soon discovered that the people arriving in these boats were men, and they didn't think they were gods in the first place. Really? Why was that? Why, that's simple, Angus. People have been travelling in boats from around the islands for hundreds and thousands of years. Well, thousands of years. Why would they think a boat would be any different? A ship would be different. They know the devastating effect of a man like Cortez from another civilization had on South America. Yes, the Spanish brought smallpox, which decimated the South Americans. Admittedly, the Incans might have thought they were gods at first, but that soon disappeared. That very much soon disappeared. The Spanish were shit scared of the Incans actually attacking them. It was only once they killed their king, the Incan emperor, through trickery, that the Spanish actually took a lot of the gold and stuff. But the Incans did figure them out to be men. They never really took them on as gods. So they weren't actually another great example of this. So we must now take another look at the forest of question marks. He likes that phrase, eh? The forest of question marks. The array of unexplained mysteries, do they make any sense to the remains of the prehistoric space travellers? Do they lead us into our past and yet link up with our plans for the future? We'll find out, I guess. In Chapter 3, The Improbable World of the Unexplained. Woo! Where I hope there's a lot more to... There's an actual claim instead of this hypothetical bullshit for me to deal with. Although sadly I suspect that's not going to happen until Chapter 5, maybe 4. I think it's all going to be bullshit until then. So there you go, folks. Chapter 2 broken down pretty much. Like I said, I won't be around for a wee while, but I'll get Chapter 3 up soon enough. Bye.